They told her she was too quiet to be noticed, too plain to be wanted, too ordinary to be remembered. But one rain-soaked night, everything changed. The skies over New York thundered as if echoing the storm inside Ava Monroe's heart. She stepped onto the glistening sidewalk in heels that hurt and a dress she only wore because her friend insisted. Her coat, too thin for the cold, barely shielded her from the downpour, but she didn't care. Not tonight. Behind her laughter, spilled from the grand glass entrance of the elite Redwood Agency, Galatha, place where everyone who was someone had gathered. It was Ava's first time among such a powerful crowd, the polished, poised, and perfect, and she had never felt more invisible. Ava had worked tirelessly for years. Her days were filled with editing others' stories, best-selling authors, influential bloggers, polished personalities with dramatic lives. But her own story, it was always in the margins. A small-town girl with big dreams who moved to the city hoping to matter, only to be placed in the shadows of people who already did. Tonight was supposed to be different. It was her chance to network, to stand out, to be seen. But instead, she had spent most of the evening alone by the refreshments table, pretending to scroll through her phone, until Rachel, the loud, confident co-worker who got away with anything, shoved a champagne flute in her hand and whispered with a wink, "One wild night, Ava. Just one. For once in your life. Let go." Ava smiled politely, but something inside her cracked. She had spent too long being cautious, too long being good, too long playing it safe. She didn't want to be the quiet girl anymore, and so she drank. One glass became two, then three. The music got louder. Her thoughts got fuzzier. The room spun with golden lights and glittering laughter. For the first time in years, Ava laughed too. She laughed like someone who didn't carry weight on her shoulders, like someone who had never been left behind. She danced. She tossed her heels in a corner and let her curls fall free. She twirled in that borrowed black dress and forgot that her rent was late, that her inbox was full, that her dreams felt out of reach. She wanted to disappear, not into pain, but into joy. And then she saw him. Tall, quiet, and watching from the shadows. A tailored suit clung to his frame like it was designed for him alone. Dark hair slightly tousled, sharp jaw, eyes like storms. He didn't move like the others, didn't boast, didn't laugh too loud. But when Ava caught his gaze across the dance floor, the air stilled. He didn't look at her the way other men did. He didn't see her as a passing blur. He saw her, and suddenly, everything inside her dared to believe. What if, just tonight, she was someone else? She approached him before she could think better of it. "Hi," she said. Simple, real. He smiled like he'd been waiting for her all along. "You don't belong here," he said, not unkindly. She laughed. "I know." And that's how it began. They talked for hours. About music, about art, about running away and starting over. He listened like her words mattered, like she mattered. He offered her his coat when she shivered. She told him stories she hadn't told anyone. He never once asked what she did for a living. He didn't ask where she came from or what she wanted. He asked who she was when no one was watching. By midnight, the city belonged to them. By 2 a.m., her hand was in his as they ran laughing down Fifth Avenue in the rain. By 3 a.m., she was in a warm bed, in a stranger's penthouse, wrapped in silk sheets and silence. Sunlight poured in through massive windows. The skyline blinked at her like a postcard, and beside her, still asleep, was the man from the night before. Only now, the pieces clicked into place. The art on the walls, the grand piano, the elevator that needed a special key. This wasn't just any man. She had spent the night with James Whitmore, the reclusive, heartbroken tech millionaire known as the Ghost of Manhattan. She had no idea what she had just walked into, and she had no idea that this one wild night was only the beginning of everything. She sat frozen, barely breathing, as the morning light cast golden reflections across the sleek marble floor. Everything about the room screamed wealth, quiet, deliberate wealth. Not the kind that flaunted itself, but the kind that didn't need to. Hand-painted canvases adorned the walls. A sculpture sat quietly in the corner, and the scent of expensive cedar lingered in the air like memory. Ava turned slowly, careful not to wake him. He lay there, peaceful, his face more relaxed than it had been the night before, as if in sleep he'd shed years of something heavy. His dark hair spilled slightly onto the pillow, the rise and fall of his chest steady, calming. Still the same man from last night, the stranger who'd made her feel like she wasn't invisible, but also not the same at all. Now, he looked like someone with secrets, and a story she hadn't been told. Her mind raced. What had she done? What had she said? Why had she come here? But deeper than the panic was something else. She didn't feel afraid. She felt safe. Safer than she had in months, maybe years. Before she could make sense of it, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, hazy with sleep, and found her instantly. That same storm-gray gaze, unblinking, real. But instead of shock or awkwardness, he gave a small, tired smile. "You stayed," he said simply, as if that meant something. Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't even sure what she meant to say. "I should probably go," she whispered. He sat up slightly, propping himself on one elbow, watching her like she was a painting he didn't want to look away from. "Do you even remember how you got here?" "I remember." She paused, laughing, a lot talking, and the rain. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You cried, too." That caught her off guard. She looked away, not loud, just quietly, "Like you were finally letting something out," he said. "I didn't ask. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." A lump formed in her throat. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. She reached for her dress, still draped over the back of a nearby chair, suddenly desperate to put the layers of her old life back on. He seemed to notice, but didn't try to stop her. As she dressed, he disappeared briefly into another room. She could hear the hum of coffee being brewed, the simple sound of morning, normal and strange all at once. When he returned, he held out a cup without a word. Ava hesitated, then took it. "I'm James," he said finally, as if that hadn't already been obvious. "I know," she admitted softly. Something flickered in his eyes, not pride, not ego, something closer to weariness, like he was used to being known for all the wrong reasons. "I googled you just now," she added, to lighten the moment. "Sorry," he chuckled. "I would have been more worried if you didn't." Ava sipped the coffee and let the silence stretch between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, just full of things unsaid. "You're not what I expected," she finally said. He raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm a billionaire. Because billionaires don't usually hand you their coats in the rain, or listen without interrupting, or dance barefoot in the street like they have nothing to prove." That made him smile, but there was sadness behind it. "I haven't danced in years," he said. Last night was the first time since he didn't finish the sentence. She didn't push, but something inside her wanted to know everything. He took her empty cup and set it aside. "You don't have to explain anything, Ava, about last night, or this morning. If you want to leave, I'll call you a car. No questions, no judgment." It was the kindest offer anyone had made her in a long time, but she didn't want to leave, or maybe she just didn't want to go back to the silence of her apartment, the reminder of a life that felt like it was stuck in a loop. "Still," she said, "thank you. I should go. I have work." He nodded. "At Redwood Agency." "Right." Her eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "You told me last night. You talked about editing stories no one ever knew you worked on, about wanting to write your own one day." She stared at him. "You remember all that?" "I remember everything," he said quietly. "You weren't like anyone else in that room." The words settled deep in her chest. He walked her to the elevator, handed her a folded note just before the doors closed. She didn't read it until she was already halfway downtown. It said, "If you ever want to disappear from your life again, even just for a night, call me." No expectations, just two people, no masks. And at the bottom, a number. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the sudden possibility that her life might finally be turning a page. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, typing lines she didn't remember writing, nodding in meetings she barely heard. The city buzzed around her like it always did, but for once, she was somewhere else entirely. By evening, her phone buzzed. One message. "James, I forgot to ask, do you like music?" She stared at it for a long time before replying. "Ava, only the kind that makes me feel something." There was no reply, just silence. But 2 days later, an envelope arrived at her door. Inside, a handwritten letter, and 2 tickets to a private piano concert. No names, just a location, and a note. "You said you wanted to feel something. Let's start with that." She sat on the edge of her bed, heart pounding. Because no one had ever written her a letter. No one had ever remembered the things she said when she thought no one was listening. and no one had ever looked at her like James did, with quiet reverence and a trace of sorrow, like he was still healing from something, and maybe she could be the bomb. That night had started as a moment of escape, but maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of being found. The sun was just beginning to rise when Ava stepped onto the train platform, the morning air still clinging to the quiet city like a secret. She saw him before he saw her, James standing near the edge, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, staring down the empty tracks as though they led to some place only he remembered. She almost turned back, not out of fear, but out of something more familiar, the instinct to protect herself before anything could go wrong, before hope could grow too loud. But something about the way he stood there, silent, patient, like a man finally ready to face something he'd avoided for too long, made her feet keep moving. He turned as she approached. No smile, just a nod, a shared understanding. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would." He didn't reach for her hand, and she didn't expect him to. This wasn't about romance, not yet, maybe not ever. It was about something deeper, a healing neither of them had words for. The train ride was mostly silent, but not awkward. The kind of silence that lets your thoughts float freely without judgment. Every now and then, James would glance out the window like he was seeing memories, flickering past the glass. Ava didn't press him. She just sat there, letting the rhythm of the tracks and the soft rustle of her coat fill the space. After 2 hours, the train slowed into a small coastal town, quaint, timeless, like it had been forgotten by progress, on purpose. "This is where she grew up," James said as they stepped onto the gravel path leading toward a narrow street of cottages and bakeries. "We used to spend summers here. Her family still owns the house." Ava followed his lead, unsure what to say. She could feel the tension in his shoulders, the way he carried memories like weight in his spine. He wasn't just showing her a place, he was walking into the heart of his grief. They stopped in front of a white cottage with peeling blue shutters and a crooked gate. Wind chimes sang from the porch, and a faded mailbox still bore the name Winters in cursive. "She always said we'd retire here someday," James murmured. "Open a little bookstore, have a garden, bake too much." Ava watched as his jaw tightened, his eyes tracing the porch steps. "I haven't been back since her funeral. Do you want to go in?" He shook his head. "I just needed to see it again, to know it's still here." They sat on the porch steps in silence, the salt air brushing past them. Birds chirped in the distance. A dog barked once, then quieted. The world didn't seem to care that two broken people had come to remember something they'd lost. "She used to make the worst coffee," he said suddenly, a laugh breaking through his grief. "Burnt every pot. We drank it anyway just to hear her sing in the mornings. She sang everything, like life was a musical." Ava smiled softly. "She sounds unforgettable." She was. He turned to her, his voice low. "But so are you." The words hit her harder than she expected. "I'm not trying to replace her," she said, because it felt important. "You're not," he said. "You're helping me remember that I'm still alive." That kind of honesty was rare, too rare, and Ava realized in that moment she wasn't just walking through James's past. He was slowly, painfully inviting her into his future. Later, as they walked down the shoreline, toes sinking into cold sand, James said something she never saw coming. "I want to fund your dream." She stopped. "What? The children's book you told me about? The one you wrote and never submitted? The one that scared you because it was too personal?" Her eyes widened. "How do you even remember that?" "I remember everything you say, especially the parts you try to hide." Ava turned away, heart racing. "It's not ready. It's real," he said. "And real is what the world needs more of." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded paper. It was a check. She didn't look at the amount, just the signature. His name. "I can't take this," she said immediately. "You don't have to. But it's yours if you want it. Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I expect anything. But because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most. And I never forgot what that felt like." Tears threatened to rise, but she held them back. "Why me?" "Because you showed up in the rain. Because you listened. Because you made me laugh on a night I forgot how. And because you've been through your own storms, and somehow, you still choose to hope." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her and seen that before. As the sky turned, gold and purple behind them, Ava let herself believe just a little that maybe this wasn't just a chapter in someone else's story. Maybe it was hers, to dot, and maybe, Just maybe, it was only the beginning. The next morning, the city greeted Ava with a drizzle and a silence she couldn't explain. She sat at the corner of her tiny kitchen table, James's unsigned check still folded inside her notebook, untouched like a fragile dream. The night before had left something inside her trembling, like the earth had shifted, and she wasn't sure yet if she was still on solid ground. It would have been easier to pretend it was just a beautiful, temporary escape, but something about James's honesty, his grief, the quiet strength beneath his sorrow made everything feel too real to ignore. She'd barely touched her coffee when her phone buzzed. "James, can you meet me today? There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the start." Her fingers hovered over the screen. The words didn't scare her, but the urgency behind them did. 40 minutes later, she found him at the Botanical Conservatory on the west side of the city. It was his favorite place, though she only knew that because once, weeks ago, he mentioned he used to come here with his mother. A tiny detail she hadn't forgotten. He was already waiting inside, standing near the koi pond beneath a glass dome that made the whole world feel suspended in green and gold. When she approached, his back was straight, but his eyes were wary. "I didn't know how to say this," he began, "and I don't expect you to understand right away." Her chest tightened. "Okay, ... What is it?" James reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded photo. He handed it to her slowly, like passing a secret. Ava unfolded it. It was him with a woman she didn't recognize. But the shock wasn't the woman. It was the child between them, a little boy, maybe 3 years old, blonde curls. James's eyes. "I have a son," James said quietly. "His name is Noah." The world tilted for a second. Ava stared at the photo, her mouth dry. You never mentioned." "I know," he interrupted gently, "and that was wrong. I didn't hide him because I'm ashamed of him. I hid him because he lives with his grandparents across the country, my late fiancé's parents." Ava looked up. "You let them raise him?" He nodded, voice trembling. It was part of her will. She passed so suddenly, and I was broken, barely holding myself together. I didn't think I could be a father to anyone. I thought I'd ruin him." A long pause stretched between them. The sound of water trickling in the pond became the only thing keeping the moment from cracking. "I send money. I visit when I can. But I haven't brought him here. I haven't let him into this life. Until now." Ava swallowed. "Why now?" James met her eyes. "Because for the first time in years, I'm imagining a future again. A real one. And it doesn't feel right hiding him from someone who might be part of that future." Her breath caught in her chest. She wanted to run. Not out of fear, but because this was too big, too raw, too permanent. Loving someone broken was one thing, but loving someone with a whole other life, a child, that was more than just emotion. That was responsibility, legacy, sacrifice, and yet, a small, quiet part of her heart whispered, "He trusted you with this." "I don't know what you're asking me," she said finally. "I'm not asking you for anything," James said. "I'm just sharing the truth. I didn't expect you to change your life for me, but I couldn't let us move forward on a lie." Ava sat on the stone bench near the pond, the picture still in her hands. The boy's smile was bright, innocent, untouched by the grief that had shadowed his father for so long. "I grew up without a mother," she said softly. "I know what it feels like to wonder why someone left, why someone didn't try harder. And I also know what it means to need someone, to believe in someone only for them to disappear again." James lowered his eyes. "I know I've made mistakes." She shook her head. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, if you're ready to try, really try, to be his father, to heal, you can't do it halfway." He stepped closer. "I don't want to do anything halfway. Not with him, not with you." Ava stood slowly. "Then I want to meet him." James blinked, surprised. "You do?" "I want to meet all of you, James, not just the man in the coat who rescued me from the rain, not just the one who took me to hear music and remembered things I barely said aloud. I want to meet the man who's trying, who's scared but still shows up. For his son, for his own heart." The emotion on his face, shock, gratitude, relief, was so pure, so unguarded, it made her throat tighten. "He's coming here next weekend," James said after a long silence. "Would you join us? Just lunch, nothing formal." "I'd like that." He smiled for the first time that day. Not the careful, half-hearted one, a real smile, the kind that made her want to believe in mornings again. As they left the conservatory, something in the air shifted. The storm clouds were pulling back. Light was beginning to pierce through the glass dome, casting golden beams over the garden paths. And, for the first time in a long time, Ava didn't feel like someone wandering on the edges of other people's story. She felt like she was walking toward the center of her own. The restaurant James chose wasn't grand or polished. It sat on the edge of the lake, with chipped teal paint and hand-painted signs that looked like they hadn't changed in decades. But when Ava stepped inside, she understood instantly why. He had picked it. The tables were mismatched. The chairs wobbled slightly. The windows were too foggy to give a proper view. But the walls were lined with photos, families, children, handwritten notes pinned under thumbtacks. And in the air, something gentle hung like warmth wrapped in a memory. Ava smoothed down her sweater, palms sweaty despite the calm atmosphere. She had met investors before, bosses, audiences, but this felt different. This was a child. This was a boy who had lost a mother, a boy whose future was still forming, a boy who might look at her and wonder what she was doing sitting across from him, trying to be gentle with his father's heart. And then she saw them, James holding the tiny hand of a blonde boy in a dinosaur sweater. The boy's curls bounced with every step. He wasn't shy, he wasn't even cautious. He spotted Ava and tugged James's hand excitedly. "There she is," he said, his little voice full of glee. "Daddy, that's her, right? That's the Ava you told me about." Ava blinked in surprise. Her name on his tongue felt like something sacred. James gave her a small, sheepish smile. "I might have mentioned you." Ava knelt instinctively, meeting Noah's eyes at his level. "Hi Noah, I've heard a lot about you. Did he tell you I can whistle through my teeth?" "No," she said with a grin, "but I'd really like to hear that." He grinned and leaned close, then attempted a sound that was somewhere between a whistle and a giggle. Ava laughed, not politely, not nervously, genuinely, the kind of laugh that comes from the gut, that wipes away the fear of doing something wrong. Noah beamed. They took a booth by the window, and James ordered grilled cheese for Noah, soup for Ava, and nothing for himself. He barely touched the menu. He was watching, not in a possessive way, in an awestruck way, like he couldn't believe this moment was real. "I brought my book," Noah said, holding up a colorful picture book. "Daddy said, you like stories." "I love stories." "Me too. Mommy used to tell me ones about a flying fox named Benny, but sometimes I forget the endings." "That's okay," Ava said softly. "Some stories don't need endings. Sometimes they're just little pieces of magic that stay with us." Noah's face lit up at that. While he flipped open his book and began showing her the pages, Ava could feel something shifting in the air between her and James. This wasn't just a visit. It was an unwritten promise. Later, when Noah needed the restroom, James walked him to the back of the restaurant, leaving Ava for the first time alone with her thoughts. She watched them go, James's hand protectively on his son's shoulder, the way Noah leaned back into him without even thinking. Trust, safe, unspoken, love. It brought something unspoken to the surface in her too. She had spent most of her life moving carefully, building walls instead of homes. But this moment, this child, this quiet chance with a man who had offered his truth like an open wound, it felt nothing like what she feared. When James returned, he slid into the booth with a breath, like the weight of the past few years had followed him all day. "I know, it's a lot," he said quietly, meeting him, seeing how complicated this life is. Ava looked at him steadily. "It's not complicated, it's real. Real things just take more courage." He studied her. "You're not afraid." "I'm always afraid," she said. "But I'm learning that fear doesn't mean stop. Sometimes it just means this matters." James reached for her hand, then not boldly, just gently, like an offering. Her fingers curled into his without a second thought. Noah returned moments later, climbing back into the seat and flashing them both a suspicious look. "Are you guys holding hands?" James smiled. "Is that okay?" Noah considered this. "I guess, as long as you don't do the gross kissing stuff." Ava burst into laughter, and James followed the sound, freeing something in the room. After lunch, they walked along the lakeshore. Noah raced ahead, arms outstretched like airplane wings. The wind tousled his hair, and in that moment, he looked like a boy who had always been free, always been loved, always belonged. But James's voice pulled her back. After she passed, "I didn't think I had anything left to give," he said quietly. "I was going through the motions, managing money, buying silence, showing up but never being present. And then I met you. Ava didn't respond. She just waited, letting him have space to finish. You reminded me that life doesn't pause just because you're grieving, that people still laugh, still create, still surprise you. She looked up at him, the lake shimmering behind them. And what about now? He took a deep breath. Now I want to live like I mean it. She reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind his ear. Then let's write a new story, James. One where none of us have to be perfect, just present. Noah came barreling back toward them, cheeks pink from the cold. Can Ava come with us next time we visit Grandma and Grandpa? James looked at her, eyes searching hers for the answer. Ava knelt beside Noah and smiled. I'd love that. That evening, long after the sky turned dark and the lake stilled like glass, Ava sat in her apartment. The check James had given her weeks ago still lay in the notebook. She didn't need it anymore, not in the way she thought she did, not to feel worthy, not to chase someone else's definition of success. She would publish her book. She would write more, but not for validation. She would do it because there were little boys who missed their mothers, and there were grown men who needed to believe again, and women like her who once stood in the rain, alone now standing in the sun with something she never thought she'd have again, a place to belong, a story that mattered, and a hand to hold through it all.